Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Edwards, and I would like to welcome you all to this RLW Read, Listen, Watch. I am super excited about it because we're talking about one of the hottest topics in the industry, and that's navigating the legal side of subcrews. And sponsored by Adams and Reese, so thank you, because this is a really important topic and we're going to learn a lot today. And a few housekeeping items before we dive into our introductions. First of all, we are recording this, and it will be available on rooferscoffeeshop.com within 24 hours. So if you want to share it with friends, colleagues, or anyone else who needs to see this, please do so. Also, we've opened the chat. So you can tell us who you are, where you're from. If you have questions throughout, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And we'll be having a Q&A Q&A period at the end where we will answer your questions. So let's dive in. First of all, our first guest, you all know probably, is Trent Cotney from Adams and Reese. Now, Trent was actually just wrapping up a webinar on this very topic that he was doing through Owens Corning. And he will be here in just a couple of minutes while he wraps that one up. But Trent is with Adams and Reese, our sponsor today, and he specializes in OSHA defense, in contracts, in licensing, in defense. He is just an amazing, very smart, knowledgeable person on this topic. So we are thrilled to have him joining us here in just a couple of minutes. And then we've also got with us today, Justin Bedwell. And Justin, I'm going to let you tell our audience a little bit about your background and who you are.
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me, Karen. And I want to thank the Roofers Coffee Shop podcast. You guys are fantastic. And special thanks to Trent and Adams and Reese for considering to bring me on as well. My name is Justin Bedwell. I'm the owner of Camouflage Roofing and Construction. We are corporately located in Moore, Oklahoma, and we have another satellite office here in Oklahoma. I started my adventure in construction whenever I was a teenager. My dad had more kids than the old lady in the shoe, so we were all indentured servants, learning how to do everything from pour concrete all the way to putting ridge caps on by ourselves. I shingled several houses by myself with these two bare hands at a 16-foot trailer. I was in the military for a decade, and I would buy and sell houses and work on them, strip them down, install. But I became infatuated with the process and information. After I got out of the military, I went to work for a company that I knew the owner of. He encouraged me to come along and learn how to do some of the stuff that he was doing, and I got into that and moved along, progressed, started with door knocking, moved to setting leads and appointments, and then running my own appointments all the way up to management. Moved out to a different territory, opened a satellite version of his business in another state. Learned a lot, left there, went to work for a nationwide roofing company, and I ended up working my way up to a manager of a territory that included 6 states. So I've seen a lot, done a lot, storm chased, done it all within the industry. Glad to be able to say that I've pretty much seen and dealt with all different manners of issues in a variety of different markets.
Well, we're glad that you are here, Justin, and I don't think Trent has arrived yet. So we were going to start off with talking about some statistics and, where we are today. And I saw some of these statistics and I don't have them, and I'll have Trent share them when he gets on. But the percentages were really high of the number of contractors that are using subcrews currently. And we kind of have to, right? I mean, Justin, we talked about this yesterday. How many are doing 1099s versus W-2s? And what are these regulations that keep changing? I know there was a new one that just went in effect last month in March. And when Trent's here, we're going to talk about that because I don't even want to get into any of those legalities without him here. But maybe, Justin, you can just tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and maybe how we got where we are today with the boom in the use of subcrews?
Well, what I see typically, and what I have seen in other markets, is that sub crews allow you to go out and find crews at an accelerated rate. So you're able to go out, you're able to cherry pick and hand pick versus the onboarding process of a W-2 employee. Then you have all these different things that you have to navigate, and it allows companies to mitigate their loss or exposure, if you will. And again, everybody's got their own different makeups in the way that they do business. But from what I see is that you don't like it changes the dynamic between employer employee relationships, and the crews are ran as their own individual entity. Now, the way that we got here is cost and inflation. And then skilled labor. Whenever you put somebody on a W-2, they're expected hourly rate and hourly pays and all these things. 1099 roofers want expediency, and we want efficiency. So you don't want 3 to 5 days of construction going on in the neighborhood if you don't have to, or at a job site where they don't need to be. So these guys are going out finding these crews, and they're going to maximize their efficiency where they can put this crew on a job and they can be done in one day, and then they're paid in a lump sum. It's a per square basis most oftentimes. Absolutely.
All right. And, labor shortage is definitely, as you mentioned, one of the reasons that we're here today, because in talking about you finding the people that want to do the work,
Yeah.
right? That's a challenge.
That is a challenge. And COVID definitely played a factor in that. You see a really, really big boom in shortage of labor after, or post COVID. There's a lot of people out there that are now not necessarily wanting to get out there and do the hard stuff. The other part is that for a very long time as a culture, we have pushed education, 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 and we haven't pushed skilled trade, skilled trade, skilled trade. So it's kind of a tipping point where we're having to get labor where we can with people that are willing to do the work. We're struggling with people. The people that are getting up in age are moving out of the workforce, and you're not able to retain that. And there's not a whole lot of influx of people that are willing to go in and do this hard manual labor, albeit they can make very, very good money.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and that's why we're here today, is to talk about it and look for answers. So let's look at the different type of business models and compare. Well, before we do that, welcome, Trent. I see you just popped on. We're glad you're here. I told everyone you were just actually talking about this on a webinar previously, back to this one. But I want to go back, if you'll bear with me, because I think it's really important to look at the statistics that you, whoops, no, there we go. Nope, that's Justin. One more forward. Okay. You had some statistics that you shared with us from one of your other presentations, and I just want people to understand the numbers. And if you're using Subcrews, you're not alone. So can you share a little bit of that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the statistics that we've seen, and I'm sure it's probably even grown more since then, is roughly 90% of residential are using, subcontract labor. It might not be 100%, but a large portion of that is up there. And then on commercial side, it's anywhere from 60 to 75%. So in the last 3 years, we've really seen this emerge to become sort of a dominant trend, where a lot of roofing contractors out there are basically becoming construction managers, where they're subbing out almost 100% of their labor. And I think it's here to stay. And if anything, I think it'll probably grow.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. I am going to advance ahead. We talked about how we got here, and now let's take a look at the business model. How does that, how does that look like? What does it look like for you, Justin?
For me in Oklahoma, 1099 has become king, as Trent said. It's one of those situations where you have to go based off of the market. And we were kind of talking about it before the podcast started, is that if you're going to try to super regulate crews, and you're going to start taking money out of their check, and you're going to start doing these things, they're going to leave you to go to a more a market that is more suitable for them, because there are places like Texas that's like it's still literally the wild west, and subcrews are always going to continue to flourish down there. Everybody wants to be able to be paid. Everybody wants to do these things that they need to do to make sure that they're being able to take care of their family. Crews are no different than business owners like myself, so they're going to want to make sure that they're being paid. But whenever you see the 1099, you can see the allure. And as what I see within my particular market is that you have to be competitive, and if you're not being competitive, you're going to go away. And as I told you, the universe and every homeowner on the planet wants efficiency. Every business owner wants efficiency. The most efficient way to do a roofing job, especially in residential, is one day get in, get it torn down, clean it up, get everything installed, and then clean it up, move along, and you get in and get out of the neighborhood, because you have wives, you have dogs, you have babies, you have all these different things. Whenever you've got a W-2 comparison, most of those guys want to be paid by the hour, as we've already spoken about. Well, by the hour, they're going to want 3 to 5 days to take care of that same project. Well, that's 3 to 5 days of nails and bare feet and tires and dogs and upset children. So go ahead, Trent. You have anything on that?
No, you're spot on, right? And I hope our listeners are appreciating, you getting hopefully the real world aspect and legal aspect, so that you can marry the two. And it's interesting, Karen. I'm watching the chat here.
Mhm.
A lot of the questions that are being generated now is because of FLSA's new law on how to properly classify workers, right? The misclassification rule. And just to kind of touch on that briefly, I don't know if we're going to touch on it elsewhere, but I'll go ahead and speak a little bit to it. On March 11th of this year, the Biden administration enacted a new law with 6 different factors that goes through the determination of whether or not a 1099, and just so our listeners understand, when I say 1099, I mean anybody that's not on payroll, right? And so anybody that's not a W-2 that you're not taking out withholding on. So it could be independent salesperson, it could be sub laborer, sub crew, subcontractor, whatever it might be, right? This new law has 6 different factors, and what the factors look at are a variety of different things. They want to look at, to what degree is a sub truly independent, right? Do they operate like a business? Do they have their own website? Do they only work for you, or do they work for other people? Do they wear your gear? All those types of questions are kind of looked at, and this law doesn't, weigh one factor over another. It looks at all of them together, throws them in a bucket, and then makes a determination as to whether or not, you've properly classified a subcontractor or a salesperson as a 1099 rather than a W-2. So the question that I'm getting at least 2 or 3 times a day now is, what should I do? Right? Should I just go ahead and make all of my sub and salespeople W-2? And I'll tell them the same thing that I'll tell you guys, and that is, legally speaking, if they only work for you and they don't work for anybody else, and you want as little risk as possible, the answer is make every single 1099 you have a W-2. That's the legal answer. If you don't want to worry about any risk whatsoever, and they only work for you and they don't work for anybody else. Now, the reality of that is, Karen and Justin, this as well, is that, if you did everything that I told you to do, your accountant told you to do, and your insurance agent told you to do, you'd be out of business. So you have to factor in the real world and combine that with the legal to get within an acceptable tolerance of risk mitigation. So how do you do that? Well, I will tell you, there's a difference between salespeople and sub labor. There's much less risk with an independent salesperson. There's still risk, so I don't want anybody to get to misconstrue what I'm saying. But with independent salespeople, if they're truly an independent salesperson, meaning they're not sitting in your office making calls, they're not doing social media for you, they're out knocking on doors, right? If they're truly independent, there's a lot of exemptions to the labor law already, right? You don't have to pay them overtime, you don't have to pay them minimum wage, you don't have to do the same record keeping, because usually they're paid by commission, right? So there's already those exemptions in place, even if they were a W-2. But as an independent salesperson, it's usually in their best interest to be independent as well, because a smart independent salesperson is going to be receiving the money into an entity and then using that entity to, legally reduce their tax footprint, right? So it is in their best interest as much as it is in the prime roofing contractor's interest to have that relationship. The other thing that's sort of a good fact is that rarely are salespeople ripping off roofs. They still get on the roofs, right? We've had one fatality, unfortunately, this year with a salesperson, but the danger isn't the same, right? There's much greater danger with a sub crew than there is with a salesperson. Now, turning now towards the sub labor analysis, where I see the majority of these problems happening is where somebody gets hurt, right? You'll get somebody that works for a sub get hurt and there's not comp there to cover them. So they'll hire bad guy lawyer, and that lawyer is looking for a big pot of money. And they will oftentimes go to the Department of Labor, go to OSHA, and use that as sort of a way to get this misclassification label so they can go after the prime roofing contractor easier. Hopefully that makes sense, Lou. It's a big topic. Obviously, we're unpacking it today, but a lot to talk about.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Justin, anything to add? I saw you nodding your head.
I mean, no, Trent's dead on. And you've gotta be able to navigate that correctly. And as he was talking about sales, sales is a lot easier to manage, and if they are structured properly, they have contracts, which we'll talk about later on in this podcast. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about setting yourself up for success. Ultimately, it's all about trying to reduce cost for the consumer, which would be your homeowner, your business owner. So what does that look like, and how do we do that effectively while still being able to generate a product and a quality installation? That's what it all boils down to.
Okay. And then the last bullet on there is that hybrid model. I think we chatted about this a little bit yesterday, where you do have W-2s maybe, but you also have 1099s. So it is possible to have both.
Yeah, it is. And so your hybrid systems would be where you employ the project manager, who may be a bilingual individual, and then they go out and they supervise your jobs, and then then the subcontracted labor is the crew itself who's doing the install. So it's kind of a situation where they work for you, but then the crew may work for them in a different facet.
Okay, so
yeah, I'll see that. I also see it where you've got a quality control person, superintendent, that may be W-2, but your crew is 1099. So there's a lot of different variations of that, and I think that's probably the majority of what I see out there is some kind of quasi model where you've got some on W-2, some 1099.
All right, so let's talk about what the risks are of utilizing subcrews.
Sure. So, obviously, I learned this firsthand. Like I'm a business owner, was a business owner. Payroll tax is anywhere from 12 to 15% more that the employer has to pay for every dollar, right? Versus cutting a check to, an independent contractor where you don't have to worry about that same burden, right? So there can be issues there. Justin mentioned a great thing where if you're W-2, you usually want to be paid hourly if you're crew, and that tends to drag out jobs. It tends to be, more problematic. There's a lot more record keeping. There's all that kind of stuff that needs to be in place. Commitment. You've got to constantly worry about getting poached, right? Yeah. With clubs, it's a little easier. You don't have the same concern. And Justin, you were saying something yesterday I thought was pretty interesting about that. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, so again, you have the ability to poach anybody in the 1099 market. A guy like myself could go and sit in my truck with no logos on, no camouflage, anything on, and I sit there and I can watch them and watch these crews, make sure that they're doing good quality installation, something that I would be able to build a base off of, and then I can walk up and I can go up there. They don't know any different whether I'm an inspector or I'm Pete in the pickup roofer from wherever. And you go out there, you see them. If you like them, you contact them, and you poach them. You say, hey, I'll pay you X amount more dollars per square. Come over and do something for me. We see it all the time in various different ways and formats. So the commitment level, it wanes based off of how you're going to pay them. And that's, cash is king. So who's going to be able to who's going to want to throw more money at that crew per square so that they can, generate more jobs? Who's going to be able to throw more jobs at them? You will lose crews. They'll take a lesser pay per square. To go work with somebody who can funnel them 100 jobs a month versus 12 or 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see that all the time, and it's that kind of is a great segue into some of the other points. The issue with these, that there are really good subcrews and they're really bad ones, right? And it's just like with employees, like it's a small world, even though it's not, it is, right? And if you've got a seasoned subcrew, they're worth paying more than the four guys you just got from Home Depot, right? So there's definitely a difference there. And part of that difference is training, right? It's, when you have W-2s, it's real easy to sit them in a room and train them with whatever safety or, how to put on a system or whatever it might be. If you got a subcrew, you just have to go based on, like what you said, you might have seen them in the field, you might have word of mouth, you might have heard from other contractors that they're good, but you're kind of gambling a little bit, right? The other issue there is, subs aren't going to be as concerned with some of the regulations and safety that you might be. So you might have, four guys on a roof that don't have any fall protection, no PPE, no nothing. If it's a sub crew, if it's your crew, you're going to be a little bit more focused on that. And that's important, not only because you want everybody to go home safe every night, but because if something does happen to that sub crew, you've got all kinds of issues, right? You've got customer unhappiness, you've got regulatory agencies out there, you've got insurance issues. There's just a whole host of things that you can't mitigate because it's outside of your control to a certain extent, right? I mean, there's certain things that you can do, but at the end of the day, you've got another entity that is engaged in that work. So those are just some of the risks.
I will. With that, Trent, is that like you talk about training. You have to incentivize a crew to train because with 1099 sub crews, one of the risks is they are going to go work for other people. That is a fact. They will go out and they will seek out other jobs outside of you because they want to continue to have the cash cow like milking. And if you're going out here and you're doing one roof and I take them away from that one roof where they can make more money in order to sit there and train them, most of the training where what I have seen with other companies is that they miss the opportunity to do on the job training, hands on, real life, getting out there. And that's also hard with the risk of utilizing sub crews and 1099 sales employees. All right. So whenever you have a 1099 sales, they're not going to be incentivized to go out there and stand over the top of them and want to do that. And making sure that they're doing the quality control and all these measures and things, and understanding that they're installing that correctly, and then taking the time to show them, hey, this is how we lace a valley properly. Hey, this is what we do over here. Hey, this is how we counter flash. Their job is to go out and gain money for themselves. Right, they're going to go out. They're going to try to generate money for themselves and their family, which you want that, but to what degree? That's another risk that you see. And a lot of the subcrew problems is that you don't have the quality control. Even the crew leaders, the guys that are running these crews, their only job in their mind is to rip it apart, put the shingles back on. If left to their own devices, there's a lot of things that are getting missed, local ordinances and codes and all these other things that cause problems down the line for homeowners and business owners. So
that's
regulation. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it's everything you just mentioned. And then one thing that sneaks up on a lot of people, this question is asked in the chat, is, depending on where you're working, you may have to have subs that are also licensed. So some states that require their subs to be licensed are California, Florida, Illinois. There are more. I'm trying to think what other ones are out
Oklahoma.
there.
Oklahoma.
Yeah. And that if you don't have a licensed subcontractor, you run into the risk of having to deal with that government agency or having a violation against your license for aiding and abetting an unlicensed contractor. So those are other things that you got to be concerned about if you're subbing stuff out.
Yeah, there's a question in here that says, "Do you have any suggestion on any training suggestion tools?" I would just say, find yourself partnerships with reputable manufacturers. Every manufacturer for any product in the roofing industry, they will give you the training. And there are videos out there. YouTube's your friend. Like, get out there, get the information. Get on major manufacturers' websites. They have tons and tons and tons of video libraries where you can see how to do things. There are toolbox talks that you can find on the web for construction stuff. And these training tools that I can say is, the more you know, and the more as a owner or manager of a business, the more that you can impart on these people. And whenever you're going out here, sitting behind your desk and doing all this stuff and requiring this, if you're not going out there and you're not willing to go put forth the effort to make sure that they're doing it correctly, there's no amount of training tools that you can find on under the sun if you don't care. You know what I mean? It's a culture thing.
Definitely. I want to make sure that we touch on safety here. It's the last bullet point in the slide, but it perhaps is one of the most important. That talk about that in terms of, I've talked to contractors that say, yeah, I can't get them to put the tie off. I can't, they just want to get up there, tear it off, put the new one on and be done, like you said, Justin. So what do you need to be aware of when it comes to safety in regards to a 1099 subcrew?
I think that safety is it's the one thing that's constantly in the back of our minds as business owners and as managers, and even, I mean, lawyers. Like, we that's always in Trent's mind. But the situation is that I talked about toolbox talks, right? And a lot of guys aren't PMCS and equipment. So if you're not familiar with PMCS, it's preventative maintenance checks and services, right? That if you're not checking their equipment, if you're not making sure that everything that is needed out there is there, that's a failure on your part as an organization. You hire a crew out, but it is ultimately your responsibility, whoever steps foot on that property, because you contracted with that homeowner, and that homeowner wants to be able to feel safe. So if you're standing out there and they don't have ladder stabilizers, if they don't have tie off situation, or cords or cables, or insert your mitigation situation here, that is ultimately your responsibility. So if you're not checking safety, they're definitely not, because their job is expediency. They want to get in, get out, and get on. Your job is to make sure that the quality and the safety is there. So if you see defective equipment, cease fire, stop what you're doing. Don't climb up that ladder. That ladder's bent. You take it, you physically remove it. Don't ask them to do it. You do it. Lead by example. And so making sure that your guys and girls that are out in the field have that ability. Like, hey, stop. Don't do that. If you need equipment, we go get it. And if the crew has a problem with it, the sub crew leader, whoever that is, you explain that to them. But a lot of that can go into your subcontractor agreements, which we'll talk on later down the line.
We will. There's an interesting question in the chat right now, because we've been talking about 1099 crews, but someone had asked if we have any advice if you're hiring a full-size company. Like, if one roofing contractor in this state wants to sub the job out to you in your state, any considerations or risks to be aware of, or are we going to cover that in the contracts?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Trent.
I was going to say, it's do your homework, right? I mean, what I always say is, we live in a world where you can find anything you want to know about anybody with a click of a button. So it's real easy to go to the official records and the court records in the county where that contractor is located and figure out, do they have judgments against them? Do they have a lot of lawsuits against them? What does social media say about them? And not that that's always the best in the world. You can't rely on, Google reviews and Yelp and everything else. But at the end of the day, it says something, right? It speaks to, at least are they responding to stuff and are they on top of stuff? So do your homework in advance. And then obviously, I recommend having a subcontractor checklist that goes through where you're checking boxes of things that you need, right? You need a signed subcontract agreement. You need, a COI. I like the policies, the CGL, the comp, make sure you're actually getting the policies and verifying that they're legit and not just, garbage policies.
Well,
Good.
Oh, I was going to say, like for me personally, my director of operations, like she has absolute like no holds bar. This is what we do with our any subcontractors that we're taking on, and everything that Trent just talked about and more. You want to verify that they have insurance. So not just get the piece of paper, because anybody can go on Excel and they can edit it, a document. You can go on there and do that, and then send that in, and then you put yourself at risk. Pick up the phone, call, hey, like I'm listed as a COI on here, like or I'm listed on the COI as a policyholder, right? Is that true? And then verify, hey, are they even a policy of yours? Oh no, they used to be 5 years ago, but they're no longer, with us. These are all things that are extremely important. And then, like Trent said, you can vet them any which way. Like, are they reputable? So I see one in here that talks about, a major contractor. If you're subbing out a major contractor, there's a lot of different ways you can verify them. Are they affiliated with major brands? What kind of certifications do they have? Like, so for me, I would be, if you looked me up on Google and you said, okay, what kind of certifications does Justin and Camouflage have? I'm a master elite with GAF, and I'm a preferred with Owens Corning. We're affiliated with these major brands. And then go to the licensure for, if you looked us up in Oklahoma, you would go to the Construction Industries Board, and then you would say, are they licensed? Go in there and type them in, see, because here's the thing about that too, is if you check their license and verify their license, they're going to be able to tell you there, do you have any complaints? Are there anything unregistered? Are they in good standing? Are they not in good standing? Are they suspended? I see that a lot. A lot of subcontractors will go out and want to do some stuff, and then they'll hire contractors that are licensed, because in Oklahoma, you have to be licensed to do anything as a subcontractor. And you go on there and you look them up, and their licenses are suspended. Or you'll go on there and you'll notice that they just ever so slightly tweak their name, and they re-registered, and now they went from suspended with this one company, but now they're in good standing with another company, and it's the same registered agent who had a failed business before. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
just making sure that you're hyper aware. That's
Oh,
probably the
Yeah.
thing.
okay, so we talked about the risks and maybe the things to be aware of, but there's benefits too, right? So let's not be doom and gloom. Let's talk about what are some of the benefits of using Subcrews.
Yeah, obviously it's the converse of what we just talked about, right? So obviously there's less tax and HR responsibilities. Sometimes you can get, experts in certain type of things. So let's say you're normally banging out shingles and you want somebody to do a metal roof, right? Or let's say there's some kind of specialty thing that you want to do. You can go out, handpick the crew that is going to be able to do this. And I see this, not just in residential, but also commercial.
Yeah.
Efficiencies, it's a lot more efficient. And there tends to be, it not only is it cheaper, but it tends to be quicker time frame that I see, getting stuff done. Not always the case, but a lot of times it is. And then, one of the reasons we see such a huge spike in investment and private equity and everything else is that there's relatively low barriers to entry. So you can come on the scene in an area that doesn't have, a lot of regulation, and basically just start, going to town, right? And it depends on which area you're in. If I go to Texas right now, I don't need a license. I could start selling jobs right now and get to work,
Yeah.
So it's all of that is some of the reasons I think, we're kind of seeing the rise of subs. Plus there's just no skilled labor, right? You can't hire enough skilled labor to kind of fill roles. So you have to kind of rely on these existing sub crews to get a lot of this work done.
No, it's absolutely it. It doesn't matter if you're doing residential or commercial. So you would have, let's say residential. Let's stay in that lane for the moment. So in residential, you would have guys that are extremely skilled at shingles, but they're not as adept at metal or composites, or or any let's stone or tile. So you go trying to move them over there, then you expose yourself to all kinds of risks because they've never done that before. They don't have the tools, they don't have the experience, they don't have it. Then you turn around, and the next thing you know, the one thing that we're supposed to do for a homeowner is to mitigate water, and elements from getting inside the house. And you get a call back, and as soon as we get a rain, because you've got now a water monsoon inside of their home due to improper installation. So the specialized expertise in handpicking crews, it's absolutely correct. Like if I was going to hire a sub crew, I wouldn't put my roofing crew out there doing garage doors. It doesn't, it doesn't work like that. So we would want to make sure that we're picking people that are licensed and specialized in that area. And it's harder to do in roofing. Especially, you have to be a general contractor if you're going to maintain, and to be a general contractor, you have to generally do just about everything. And you can, it's a rare day in the world where you find somebody that can do everything from the ground up efficiently.
No such thing as unicorns, right?
Right.
All right. Well, so if someone is not using 1099 crews and they know they need to start or they want to expand their business and are looking at it, what are some tips that we can share for them to find success in working with a sub crew?
So I think Justin kind of talked about it a little bit before. Like you want to have SOPs in place. You want to make sure that you are onboarding correctly and that you are setting very clear expectations as far as means and methods, schedule, et cetera, so you know exactly what's going to happen. Internally, the way to mitigate risk is have a strong subcontract agreement that has all the bells and whistles in it. I prefer, and we'll talk a little bit about it, using sort of a master subcontract agreement and then using that as a base to get everything that you want. If for some reason, you see issues on a job site, make sure that your paper in the file. For those of you that have heard me speak in the past, I always say in construction, the party with the best paper wins the day. If there are problems, if there are issues with safety, if there's anything like that, make sure that you're following the contract. There was a question asked, how do you deal with subs and OSHA liability? Well, one of the things I like to do is, I don't want the prime roofing contractor to be the controlling contractor as a result of safety, but I still want a safe job site. So I enforce that top down through the subcontract. That is a way that you can, ensure that you're conveying safety, that you're getting to where it needs to go, but that you're not there physically instructing people on what to do. So, for example, if you're on a job site and you see 4 guys without fall protection, let's say you've got your W-2 quality control person out there, and you see, these people out there, you go to that crew leader, you go to the head of that sub, whatever it might be, and you say, look, you're in breach of the contract because you've got 4 guys on a roof without fall protection. It needs to be corrected immediately. Stand down until it's corrected. Okay.
Yeah.
That's different than you going up and putting on a harness and having them wear your hard hats and everything, gear and everything else, right? So there's a good way to do it and there's a bad way to do it, right? And the good way is to understand what the laws and rules are, work within an acceptable tolerance of risk, and do your best to try to, stave that off by making sure that you got the right documentation.
Yeah, absolutely. The clear expectation is, again, it's a culture. Like it's a top down. So anything and everything that happens is under the camouflage umbrella. Well, who's camouflage? Me. Like that's who it ultimately falls back on. So if I'm not setting a clear expectation from the get go, then I have failed everyone all the way down to the lowest man, to include the homeowners. And the clear expectations, like hey, this is what I expect equipment wise. I don't want guys running around with these type of garments, anything that's going to cause problem. Like, so you see a problem, you see something, you say something. So why wouldn't you want somebody walking around sagging on a roof that obviously they're chances of falling because their pants may fall down by their ankles greatly increases. These are just they should be common sense things, but common sense isn't all that common, especially whenever you're dealing with skilled trades. We have to make sure that you break it down to the Barney level, to where everybody, to the lowest man and woman, can understand it. And the written contracts are the way to do it. So Trent talked about notations, and he talked about written contracts. Anything and everything that is an expectation shouldn't be a handshake expectation. It should be a clear, written, definitive expectation. The written contracts, the contracts between you and your home or building owners are extremely critical to protect you and the homeowner or the building owner, correct? The same thing with the subcontractors. The clear and written communication between you and them is to protect everyone in that situation, to include them sometimes from themselves. And then the other things is that you're going out here and you're on these jobs. So we document everything. If you are if you're a company that's just getting started, I completely and wholeheartedly endorse the fact that you should be videoing or photographing everything from the moment you step on a job site long before you even get to the contracting process, all the way through the completion of the project. Your notations are not just actual messages themselves. They can be photographs. They all of these things to help you to protect yourself and everybody else under your umbrella. One of the other things, you have a smartphone. Everybody's got a computer in their pocket. We have access to one, usually within arm's reach. We all have the ability to take out and pop out a message and say, hey, here we are. Like, this is what we talked about. This is what's going on. Make a generalized note. Find yourself a CRM that's going to be able to annotate and house that information per file. So it's not just in your notes, all unorganized. Organization is super, super critical and important, especially in the notation of jobs. The other thing it talks about in here is the vetting process. We've already touched on that. You want to make sure that you're checking thoroughly, and documenting that. So all of your subcontractors should have an individualized file. You want to make sure that you are going through there, and then you need to audit their files from time to time. You need to go through there, and you need to every quarter, every month, whatever it is, go through there and call and verify, check, write emails. Email is a fantastic way to note something. Once it goes into a system, it's there. You've got different ways to check and prove that you've got that. The licensures, make sure you check into that. That stuff is super, super important. Workers' comp, like Trent said, if you want somebody who is a workers' comp exempt, company or individual, you need to make sure that your crews have workers' comp, because they actually are the ones out there physically doing the labor. In the event that somebody inadvertently lawn darts off of a roof, the worst thing that could happen for you, your organization, and everybody in that process, to include the building owner, is for somebody to die on your property and you don't have the proper coverages, or for somebody to get hurt on their property and you don't have the proper coverages. Trent?
Yeah, you're speaking the truth, brother. I mean, that's just it. The bulk of these problems that you see that happen, regardless of whether it's OSHA or Department of Labor or state equivalents or anything, workers' comp, it's because a sub person got hurt, right? Somebody that's on that sub crew. And, having that level of safety, making sure that there's insurance there, making sure that there's a level of professionalism, is really important. That's why I don't like these crews that are just starting, right? Roofing is there's a lot of, on the job training, and there's something to be said for wisdom and experience, right?
Yeah.
It is, you can't learn roofing in a book. You've got to experience what it's like, right? And you'll get a crew that will say that they've been doing it for 20 years, but it's pretty easy to see when stuff doesn't start matching up that that's not the case. So yeah, definitely you want to do your best to kind of protect yourself. There's a question on, we have errors and omissions as a bullet point here. One of the things that I've been talking about here recently is the fact that I'm seeing more and more claims related to design, even though roofers don't really have anything to do with the design. Almost all the time, whether it's residential or commercial, there's a lot of in the field work that may happen with, head wall flashing, or, whether there's, roof to wall connections or penetrations or whatever it might be. And there's stuff where it's sort of a quasi design type element. So I'm seeing plaintiffs' attorneys bring claims, not only defect claims, but bring claims that are based on design related issues. Errors and omissions is relatively inexpensive for roofing contractors to get because you're not design professionals. So it's worth asking your agent and also looking at your sub policies to see if they've got that kind of coverage. Because if you get tagged from a customer with this type of thing, you want some kind of insurance pot there. Unfortunately, most contractors don't even think about it. So
Well, that you're absolutely right, Trent. You go out on these jobs and you like it doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial. And one of the you're mixing new construction with old construction any which way you slice it. New materials going on old structures. I've never been out on one that's square ever, not one time in my entire life. And it would be a wonderful world if everything went exactly the way that the book or the engineer described it. But what we see is an impromptu add addition of a porch here, and then now you've got to cut down a ridge cap here and do these things. And so you constantly are having to overcome the design flaws of the builder, whoever that may be. Yeah.
All right, I just got my 15-minute alert saying, wow, this 45 minutes has gone really fast. So we've got a couple of slides to get through, and we have been answering questions as we go. So if we don't have much time at the end for Q&A, I think that's going to be just fine. So if you do have some questions, pop them in there now. But we're going to talk a little bit about best practices, and then we're going to talk about building the relationships with your subcontractors, and then where to find help with all this stuff. So we have 15 minutes left. Let's start with the best practices and work through that.
Sure.
I'm going to let Trent take this one, but I will say that subcontractor agreements, that's your absolute bread and butter. Contracts between you and the homeowners are important, but those contractor agreements are going to be your best practice, hands down, 100% of the time. And I know a good lawyer, you're all looking at him, who can write you a fantastic master subcontractor agreement. So go ahead, Trent.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's really just about buttoning down internal procedures and policies, right? And it's having that level of professionalism. It's great to get money in the door, and I always say, the cracks show when that money stops. So you want to really take a look, take a day. It can even be on a weekend. Think about, where am I weak? Am I weak on, my safety side? Do I need a better safety manual, better toolbox talks, better, onboarding? Do I need better selection process for myself, whatever it might be? Look at your own internal employment procedures. What does your employee manual look like? What are your HR policies? I always try to reverse engineer. So I look at bad stuff that happens and then reverse it and say, what could I have done differently? What does my contract lack that I should add in there to protect against this customer issue in the future, right? Driveway cracks. Do I have a driveway crack disclaimer in my contract, right? Whatever it might be, right? That's the key thing. And then drilling down the importance of that, from top to bottom, having that culture of safety or that culture of professionalism is really important. It's easy for the people listening to this to say, yeah, we do all that. But if the people out on the field, they're getting in fist fights, drinking beer on the roof, that kind of stuff, that, you got to have a level of professionalism. And one of the questions you asked, Karen, is, where do you go for resources? Well, the associations are a great place to look. And, I've been involved with NRCA for a long time. I serve as their general counsel, but they offer a lot of training tools. They offer pro certification, which is almost like a master's degree in your roofing discipline. And, subs could potentially benefit from that. But there's also local associations, whether it's your state association or a regional association that you can look at. And, I think Justin mentioned it before, manufacturers are a great resource. They have tremendous amount of information on there, everything from safety to employment to how to install a roof. I'm on these manufacturer sites all the time, just learning stuff myself. Granted, I don't know half of what, our audience knows, but it benefits me to get a better understanding of what it is. And that's where a lot of times I go, right? And I think knowledge is key. And one of the things that I think is important are those vendors, it's manufacturer associations that are reaching how people look today. It's like just said, everybody's picking up their phone, right? I want to be able to scroll and see a video. And that's how, it's changed a lot. At the time where I would sit back and crack a book open, it's not, it's a little bit different. I'm listening to Audible, I'm looking at my social media, that kind of stuff. So I think it's mixing it up so that you're speaking in a language that everybody can understand.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. So I want to talk, we spent a little bit of time talking about this yesterday, Justin, you and I, about building the relationships with subcontractors. So why don't you get us started on this topic?
So I'm gonna like everything top down, it revolves around trust. And if you're not building trust at all with your crews and your sub crews and your even your subcontracted salesmen or whatever. They have to trust you. You have to trust them. So how do you do that? It's through information, right? Information is the universal currency. What are you willing to spend on somebody information wise to be able to reciprocate something? So you want a exchange of currency. The only way that I build trust with Trent is me to give Trent all the information that he needs to do what Trent needs to do, and that's to make an informed decision for himself, right? And so I think that going out and talking, catching them out in the field, making sure that they know that what you're talking about. Strong communications is like it goes both ways. Like, I want to know that you know what you're doing, but they also want to know that you know what they're doing, right? And so just making sure that you're talking and having an open line of communication. The next thing is language barriers. The language barriers, having somebody that readily speaks the language that you can interpret, or at least that they can interpret for you. Because I know a ton of guys that, so I'm no Spanish aficionado at any stretch of the imagination, but I know enough to hear what's going on out there. I rarely ever talk in Spanish, just because I'll butcher everything under it, about it, and but at the same time, being able to have somebody that can do that, so that you can understand them, what they need, so that they can understand you and what you need. Same thing with the guys and girls in your offices, like making sure that language barriers doesn't just mean regions of the world, different languages. The language barrier is also like, hey, how does this person understand this? How am I talking to this person? What is my physical communication saying to these people? Because language is so much deeper than words. You have they guesstimate that upwards of 95% of all communication is nonverbal. My body language is super, super critical and important in that situation.
Excellent. And how many times can we say documentation, right? We said notation,
Yep.
documentation, photos.
Well, so I'll hit on the digital documentation. For what I see, it's and where the places that I've been and the places that I came up in roofing, documentation is everything. Making sure that you're holding everyone accountable. You have that master subcontractor agreement, so they have a baseline understanding. But your digital documentation would be like your work orders going out, your technical orders going out into the field. Hey, this is exactly what we're doing. This is how it goes. This is step by step what I want, and having clear cut definitive situations where you're giving them the information. One of the other things that I see is digital documentation. Remember what I said about taking pictures. You take photos of everything, putting them into a file or a clickable link. And if you have a CRM that makes that more accessible, all power to you, but not everybody's at that point. And, different companies are at different levels. But, giving them the information so they can see what it is, until they can actually get out there and touch it and feel it and smell it. Just making sure that they have the information, what, the who, what, when, where, and how. Trying to keep yourself. There was a situation that happened in Oklahoma a few weeks ago where, and it happens more often than not, where companies like to drop materials the day of, and then the guys have zero information, and they show up and they start tearing apart the wrong house. Then a company gets sued into oblivion. Like, digital documentation could have definitely saved them a huge lawsuit and the free roof that they gave out. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple of things, digital is definitely the way to go. Like, if you're listening to this and you're still all paper, you gotta morph, because at some point, regardless of whether you're giving it to a relative or you're selling it or you're doing something, whoever's looking to buy it or take it over is going to want to have, that ease of access. And, back on safety, it's very easy to maintain a lot of different photographs and issues that can help you understand what job site safety is, whether you're using, something like company cam, or you're using, going out there and taking photos yourself. Key thing is you got to be mindful of that information is very great and useful, but you also have to be mindful that there's not something in there that's damning. So,
Mhm.
for example, like the photo that we've got here, I'm sure that's the guy's not actually doing work. I'm sure he's an
No.
actor. This is a tree
Stock
site
photo.
inspection. Yeah. Yeah, but we had a situation where a guy was taking photos, safety director wasn't reviewing it, clear safety violations. And as a result, the guy ended up getting a willful. We were able to knock it down, from an OSHA standpoint, but you want to be mindful of that. The other point that I want to make to everybody, and this is more a larger 35,000 foot view, is recognize that we are in an administration right now that is pro-union, pro-employee. We just heard about the, Federal Trade Commission's non-compete ban today. Goes into effect in 120 days. A lot of rules there. Stay tuned for more on that one. But we're also in an administration that has open borders and relatively lax immigration policies. That can change, right? That can change dramatically. And the reason why we're harping on this is that if you have these tools in place, if you have the oversight in place, if you are doing what you need to ensure that you're running safe and professional job sites, regardless of what happens politically, one way or the other, good, bad, indifferent, you're always protected, and I always believe, I don't care what the politics are one way or the other, professionalism is professionalism, right? You come prepared, you understand what the rules and laws are. They may change, but you always have a good game face on, regardless of what it is. And I think that's the case regardless of whether we have very favorable immigration, no immigration, open borders, closed border, whatever the issue is, you just got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. I think some of these other bullet points that we kind of haven't touched on yet too is training. We've hit training a plethora of times today. Training is super important. I'm from my military background. If it's not, if we're not training, we're not doing something right. So we want to make sure that you're constantly providing access to it. People are, the language barrier. So language barrier is an excuse that people take to not go and spend money or spend time to train crews effectively, right? So it takes nothing to go, hey guys, I want to take a day, like we're going to stop off. I'll have GAF, for example, in my particular circumstance. I'm going to have them come in here with a Spanish speaking individual, and we're going to do like real life training, make sure that you guys understand what's going on. And that it's okay. You can pay them, you can compensate them for coming to do the training, so you want to reward them for good performance out in the field, just like you want to reward them for the training that they're doing, right? Nobody wants to go do anything for free for in this day and age, most oftentimes. And like, to them, training is work too. And so, making sure that you're giving them incentives to want to train. But there's access to everything. We have different accesses for Owens Corning, for example. I can go and I can add a situation, and I can build a curriculum within Owens Corning's university and send that as an email to my crew and say, hey, here you go. Here's some things that I would, encourage you to train, and, making sure that they have the ability to do these things. The other thing is equipment and tools, making sure that they're PMCS in their equipment. We talked about it yesterday, Karen. Guys out here, and you see them with their faulty nail guns that's been beat down. They use them every day. And then instead of checking it, they go like this. And then the next thing you know, they got a nail sticking through their palm. And then now you've got a clear safety violation and a problem all in one. So you want to make sure that they have, good equipment and tools. And that is all covered in your master subcontractor agreements. Like, and whenever you're forcing those subcontractors to provide adequate tools, then you're forcing the elevation up. You may have to pay them a little bit more per square, but it's going to save you money in the long run.
Right. And, we said there's professional help, right? There's Trent's firm, Adams and Reese is there to help with contracts. There's support. There's ways to learn about the regulations. So your associations are key for bringing you resources to accomplish what you need to accomplish. So don't feel like you're on an island. I know some folks have been putting in the chat there, the Carolinas have all this help, and almost all the associations, same. So I'm going to say, wow, we're at the end, 1 minute to go. I think we did get all your questions. So I want to say thank you all for being here. I want to thank Trent and Adams and Reese, and thank you, Justin and Camouflage Roofing, for sharing your wisdom and giving back to the industry on this important topic. It's been really great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you.
It's been great.
Thank you guys
Appreciate
for
it,
having
guys.
us. Hey, thank you, chat, for continuing to drive the train of questions throughout the process. You guys are awesome. Every situation is completely different. Every situation is dependent on different variables. However, I would say buttoning it up. Find yourself a good attorney. Get yourself good representation. Button up your paperwork. Check your egos, and have somebody review your processes and your situations.
Well said. Thank you, Justin. Thank you all. Be sure to share this with anyone that you feel will benefit from it. Visit rooferscoffeeshop.com under our Read, Listen, Watch section. And be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any future installments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.